Check, check.
Very good. We're ready to come back.
Okay.
And we're back.
Hello again, everybody. I apologize. We had some technical difficulties, and I apologize for anybody that bore witness to those difficulties. But we're back up here and ready to continue to go through the warrant and, again, answer any questions that you might have, as long as it's not from Joel. So, we did Article 4. Moving on to Article 5. So Article 5 is what we call our annual consent article. And the moderator had a really great idea way back before I was even here to consolidate a number of pretty standard and routine and housekeeping articles into one. And so that is what this article reflects. There are a number of items in there, but one of the main things that we accomplish through this article is establishing or continuing our revolving funds and setting the parameters from which those would be used. So again, that's pretty standard. Brittany or Jen, would you like to say anything to that? Okay, I'm seeing a no. Anybody have any questions? Seeing none, I will move forward to Article 6, which is another consent article. This one's sponsored by the Community Preservation Committee. And so what this consent article does is it authorizes the receipts of money into our Community Preservation Fund, which is a fund that was established about 20 years ago that again, is a surcharge on your taxes, but it can only be used for things like open space and recreation, affordable housing, and historic resources. So that is one thing that the consent article accomplishes. The other thing is that it authorizes payments for previous purchases that we have made with community preservation funds that have an annual debt service attached to it. And so right now, that consists of Oak Street, a purchase of open space on Oak Street, the high school athletic fields, the acquisition of Warren Woods, and then also the acquisition of the Valentine Estate. So that is the CPC consent article. Again, I would open it up to any of you that have comments or if you'd like to ask questions. All right, I'm either doing a really good job of explaining all of these things or people are just shy. So Article 7 is a specific Community Preservation Act fund request, and that is actually funds to restore an antique fire truck that is held by our Ashland Fire Department Association. Not the Ashland Fire Department, but the association. This is an old 1947 Mack fire truck, and so that we have had for a while, and so we've got the opportunity now to restore that. We found some parts necessary to restore it, and this allocates funding to help complete that restoration. So it'll be really nice to see that done and accomplished, and thank you to the Fire Department Association for bringing that forward, and the Community Preservation Committee, which makes these recommendations, for putting it on the warrant. So moving on to Article 8, this is the disposition of real property, which is the Main Street Fire Station. And I am going to take a break from talking and turn it over to Jen, who, with Beth Reynolds, our Economic Development Director, really has driven this process.
Sure. So Article 8 is to dispose of real property, which basically either means the sale or lease of a property. In this instance, it's a long-term lease of our Main Street Fire Station, which is 151 Main Street. And so in preparation for the new public safety building, we started to think about what we could possibly reuse the buildings for, and did a sort of longer process than we would normally partake in when we tried to lease or sell any town-owned property. So Through the process, we conducted a request for interest for the private sector to let us know what kind of commercial uses would be viable there. And then through that process, we also were able to do a survey and received respondents for a little over 400 of our residents, sort of giving us input on what they might like to see there based on the information we received from the private sector. And so we issued a request for proposal, which is sort of the formal way that we're able to dispose of property, and we received one proposal. And so will be really presenting the one proposal, which is a tap room called Clover Road that would come into town, revitalize that building and open it up for a tap room for the community to utilize. And the lease could go up to 30 years.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to reiterate what Jen said. This has been a very involved public process with multiple opportunities for input and feedback. And again, we're looking forward to presenting this at town meeting. Any questions related to that? That's the other meeting I got to go to. Okay. Moving on. Article 9, which is the establishment of a capital stabilization account by Keefe Tech. And this is a request from Superintendent John Evans and the Keefe Tech School Committee to establish a capital stabilization account. So that will, the establishment of that account will help them plan for larger capital repairs. So this vote is only to create the account. It doesn't put any funds in it. That would come through a separate process. But this is something that is really, really important as a governmental entity to have something like this so you can plan long term. We've had one for a while, and as well as multiple other communities. So certainly support this. Article 10. Excuse me, before I move on, any questions? Okay. So Article 10, it's a citizen's petition, which has been brought forward, and this petition seeks to amend the code to allow 3 minutes of speaking time for people who get up at the mic at town meeting. So currently, the way it is established through practice is 90 seconds. This would codify and change that to 3 minutes per time. So, any questions associated with that? It's pretty straightforward. So, Article 11 is actually removing the police department from civil service. I spoke to that earlier when we talked about the police department budget. We're actually going to remove this from this town meeting. For a variety of different reasons, but first of all, we're just not necessarily in the place to where we could bring that forward to town meeting, but we also need a ballot vote to affect that change. So anyway, that will be removed. It doesn't mean that we're not continuing through that process. So Article 12, it's funding for I&I, and I'm realizing now a lot of people probably don't know what I&I is. It's municipal speak for inflow and infiltration. And so what that means in layman's terms is we have a sewer system that is made up of piping and pumping stations. And so that sewer system, those pipes, what can happen is over time is they develop openings within the structure to where groundwater actually will seep in to the pipe. And so we actually are transporting and treating not sewage, but just regular groundwater, which is not good for the environment, number one. It's not really good for our finances either because we have to pay by the gallon in terms of what we treat. So what this article does is it helps us take advantage of a state opportunity to utilize grant funds and no interest loan funds to help make improvements to our sewer system to help reduce and eliminate that inflow and infiltration that happens. Anybody have any comments or questions? Okay. Make sure that's the right one. Article 13 is updating our bylaw to accept the specialized stretch code. So this is being brought forward by the Sustainability Committee, and what this does is it's adopting a new set of standards in a new code for the purpose of regulating design and construction of buildings to make them more energy efficient and reduce the use of greenhouse gases. And so you can find a lot of information on this on the web. The Sustainability Committee will be there to make a presentation and explain this a little bit more fully. But in a nutshell, that is what this is. And since the next article is similar, I will go through that and then ask for any questions. So Article 14 is sponsored by the Sustainability Committee and myself, and it creates a bylaw which establishes that any new buildings or major retrofits for HVAC systems in existing buildings will be net zero greenhouse gas emissions. And so we have, this is, I would say, a major change. I wouldn't say it's a radical change, but it's a major change to our code. But in practice, it's not necessarily that different than what we have been doing. Both the Mendez School and the public safety buildings that were constructed utilize geothermal systems to be the primary heating and cooling system for the building. So again, this would look at continuing that technology or implementing that technology in new buildings or retrofits. It would also require that any new contract with an electricity provider that the town and schools have would actually consist of 100% renewable sources, which will have an impact on cost, but hopefully also a positive impact on the environment. So does anybody have any questions on those? All right. Anybody have any comments on town meeting in general? Now's your time. Okay, great.
I thought that was a hand, but it wasn't.
Oh, you
I was like, yes.
bumps here. Thanks. All right, so that concludes our forum for next week's annual town meeting. Again, May 3rd, Wednesday at Ashland High School at 7 p.m. Copies of the warrant are available on the web. If you go to our website and you go under the community section, which is part of the menu at the top, in that community section, you will see town meeting. And so if you click on that, that's where you'll find information related to this year's town meeting. So I just want to really stress that town meeting is open to all residents, and registered voters are allowed to vote on any of and all of these articles. And it's really an opportunity for you as a resident and as a citizen and a voter to have an impact on what happens in your day-to-day life. There's really no other level of government, if you're thinking about federal, state, and local, that has such an impact on your day-to-day life. And again, so I would encourage you to participate and be a part of town meeting, be a part of the democratic process, and I hope to see you there. So thank you, everyone, for being here. Thank you, Jen, Brittany, for being here. Thank you, Paul and WACA, for basically running the Zoom show here and also broadcasting it to you at home. And thank you again, and good night.